That hurts. It hurts, but we move on.
Move on to where is the question. We'll talk about PG and Kawhi's free agency here in just a little bit. Keyshawn, J. Will, Zubin, presented by Progressive Insurance. All guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. One voice you won't hear this morning is J. Will. He was all over ESPN's coverage of the doubleheader last night, so he's sleeping in. Well-deserved day off. J. Will
Wake up, Jay.
He'll be back tomorrow. But it's a pleasure to have some NBA analysis, courtesy of the former Clippers guard Quentin Richardson, who joins us this morning. Q, thanks for being here. First things first, as a former Clipper and as an NBA fan yourself, your thoughts on this highly hyped team getting bounced before, not the NBA Finals, before the conference finals?
Morning, guys. Man, I gotta be honest here, man. I'm a Clipper, former Clipper for life. I'm very disappointed this morning, man. I was extremely looking forward to seeing the Clippers go against the Lakers and see. I mean, everybody knows if the Clippers had a chance to win the series, it wouldn't have really changed, or leveled the playing field. But just for Clipper Nation, that would have been a special moment, and for them not to get a chance, and for us not to get a chance to see these two teams at least go against each other, I feel extremely disappointed this morning.
Q, how do you define the season now that they are going back home? They're essentially out of the bubble and on the flight back to L.A.
To me, it's a disappointment. I don't agree and look at it and say, hey, This was championship the bust to me. I mean, obviously they're gonna reload and regroup and try and come back at it next year. But for me, I feel like this team was a championship caliber team. They were built to win a championship. They had the championship style coaching, and for whatever reason, this team fell short and did not deliver what they were supposed to.
On the airways, the newspapers, the talking heads, everything, today, tomorrow, the next several days, Kawhi Leonard will be under a little bit of fire, 14 points. How does his performance last night make you feel about Kawhi Leonard?
I mean, hey, man, Keyshawn, as an athlete, as a player, we know tough games happen. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to – it's a disappointing situation. You expect and you wish he would have had a better game, but I'm not going to be one of those people that, fair weather and say, hey, Kawhi Leonard isn't as great as we all know he is. He's still one of the top players, and he's done what he's done. His resume is what it is, but right now, in this moment, in this season, he was not who he needed to be to help his team advance, and they were the favorite in this situation. They were up 3-1, and there's really no excuse here. This was a series that they should have won. They had control of, and to lose it in the fashion that they lost it, they should feel very disappointed.
Let me ask you this though, Q, as an expert, an NBA player, former NBA player that's played a long time in the league and been in situations where you had leads and won some, lost some. How did this happen though? Is it X's and O's, or is it just the Willies and the Joes?
I think it goes both ways, Keyshawn. I think when this thing happens like this, 3 consecutive games in a row, when you up 3-1, and the situation is what it is, I think everybody involved has to be has to be held accountable. I think from the players to the coaches to everybody. But for me, speaking from a player standpoint, it as a player, as a leader, I needed to see more of a fight from the team than I did when it was going on. When you see game after game, you can see it coming as the second half coming, as they started to miss shots, as the Denver Nuggets started to make shots. I was looking for somebody to just no, it's not. We're not going to let this happen again. 3 consecutive games, and it was nobody. He had nobody to answer that call to say no, not now, not.
Quint, I think we might have lost Q. You still there? I think you might have lost him.
Q, you with us?
Hello?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Key.
No, I was going to say.
Sorry about that.
Quentin Richardson, former NBA player, co-host of the Knuckleheads podcast, joining us here on Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin. Let's look to the other game yesterday. Game 1, Miami Heat go up on the Boston Celtics. Tough game, big time situation at the end of the game where Bam blocks Tatum on the flush dunk to put them ahead. What is there to say about Jimmy Butler and how he's inspired the Miami Heat to continue this run?
For me, I'm one of the people that have always been a Jimmy Butler fan. I was sitting in amazement looking when everybody was judging him and speaking about him the way they were when obviously when the Minnesota situation happened, then he left Philly. But for me, it's just refreshing to watch. I'm waiting for everybody to begin to heap praise on him as one of the best leaders we have in our league. He is absolutely should be labeled and viewed as one of the best leaders because what he's doing with that team is very understated. I mean, you look at the young guys on that team; they are very good players, and they like you look at Tyler Hero. He had swag and he had confidence in college. But when Keyshawn, you know how it is coming into a league as rookies. Like these guys. Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero. These young guys are able to go out there and perform and be confident the way they are because they got teammates like Jimmy Butler, Udonis Haslem, and those type of guys. Jay Crowder. You saw Chris Paul did whatever he did to Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson. The very next play, Jimmy Butler came down, flatlined him, and threw the ball at him. And then when they asked about it in the press conference, he said, no, you can't do my shooters like that. Like, I'm not, while I'm around, I'm not going to allow that. So you know what that does to a player, Keyshawn. That empowers him.
Yes.
And that gives them the confidence that, hey, I could do what I want out here. I got guys that's not going to allow anything to happen to me, so I got nothing to be afraid of. And so that's what you see. Jimmy, UD, and those vets have really instilled that confidence that nothing is going to happen to you guys. Young folks, go out there and do your thing. I got your back, and you see that in their play.
It's a great point. Quentin Richardson joining us here, former NBA player on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. After all, you got to remember that Jimmy Butler said before the start of the Eastern Conference Finals, by the way, we haven't even played our best basketball yet, and he was right about that. Keyshawn J. Will Zubin brought to you by Sport Clips. It's a new season. It's Sport Clips haircuts. All stylists, clean, certified, guys smart. Get yourself back in the game with Sport Clips MVP experience. Enjoy a hot steam towel, relaxing shampoo, and winning cut. Check it online. Walk out with confidence. Q will get you out of here. On this one, Key sort of hesitated when I asked him this, but after everything you just said about Jimmy Butler, Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, who nobody's talking about, great rookie because Morant and Williamson got all the attention, can the Heat win the whole thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I on NBA TV, I said this before the playoffs even started. When I saw the playoff three and it was the way it was, I had them beating the Bucks just because I felt that the Bucks could be had when I watched them playing in the bubble. They didn't seem like they were the same team prior to it, and that kind of proved true. But I felt like because of the makeup of Miami, the mental and the mental toughness standpoint. I listen to Udonis Haslem. That's my boy. That's we same year high school, everything, and obviously former teammates. But I know how he's built, and to hear him talk about it and to hear him talk about what his job on that team is to get his guys ready, how the bubble can defeat you before you even get out there on the court, and to know that he's taking that approach and has that military mindset and he's in there influencing them guys, I knew what they were going to come out. I knew at the very least, these guys are ready for the dogfight, no matter what. Win, lose, or draw, it won't be because they weren't ready for the battle and they weren't ready to go fight. So that's what I knew about them, and I had no questions or no worries from top to bottom. I knew how Spo was going to be ready to coach. Spo was never unprepared. He's one of the most prepared and most vigorous and serious coaches that I've ever played for, and I respect him greatly for it. So I knew that this team would be ready for whatever's thrown at them.
Spo is head coach Eric Spoelstra, handpicked by Pat Riley. I'm so glad you mentioned Udonis Haslem. Even LeBron, Bosh, and Dwayne Wade would tell you he was the heart and soul of the Miami Heat. And obviously, as Q says, he continues to be just that, sort of a sage veteran presence. Much more NBA talk with Tim Legler coming up at 7:15. He's a former player. We'll get his perspective. And great to get the perspective of Quentin Richardson, a former player himself this morning, especially on the Clippers. Q, really appreciate it. Thanks for getting up early.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm going to go crawl back in bed now.
All right, Q.
Wish we could certainly do the same. We'll be with us, though. We want to talk NBA with you all morning long. We want to talk football. Damian Woody coming up at 7 a.m. Eastern time. He had some really searing comments about Jets head coach Adam Gase. He played his final 3 years of his career for the Jets. Key a little surprised by that. He tweeted Sunday after the Jets debacle. We'll get to that football conversation for all you football fans coming up at 7 a.m. Here's the thing that we didn't ask Q that I wanted to ask you, because I wanted to go inside the organization with Q, but you've got a good macro perspective on sports and just LA in general. At the end of next season, at the end of the 2020-2021 season, whenever that is, we don't really know when it's going to start.
Yeah.
Let's just call it December, whatever it is. But this time next year, you would think the season would be over, but you never know. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George could opt out of their contracts and become free agents. Now, remember everything they needed to do to get Kawhi and all of the draft picks they gave the Thunder to get Paul George.
Well, it's really to get Kawhi.
Right.
It was a kind of, it was
package deal.
It was the Kawhi effect is what it was.
Correct. You got to get one before you get the other, right? And we know who is more important. But the fact that now, after this season ends the way it does, yes, an atypical season, everyone's in the bubble, but to Key's point, everyone's been dealing with the same adversity. Now it's a make or break season because you give up all of that and these guys could walk by this time next year. What are you thinking inside the front office if you're Lawrence Frank, Michael Winger, the guys that are running the Clippers front office? Jerry West, who came over. You mortgaged all of this, and now they could opt in. It's no big deal, but they could walk.
You know, you're never supposed to relish in someone's sadness, right? But I just love watching them at their press conferences or sitting on the bench with that look on their face like, damn, what just happened? And you say, yeah, but I don't think that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are not going to be with the Clippers long term. Okay. I think next year they'll go back, or after this season, whenever it starts, they'll go back to the drawing board and figure it out. Yeah. Figure out who they need to add, whatever pieces they need to add, because they have a really good team. And they just didn't get it done this year. Mm-hmm. And I think the Clippers have a great organization. Yeah. They're building a new stadium in Inglewood, California. And Kawhi Leonard is there to bring a championship. To exit because something didn't happen immediately would be a mistake by them. And that would be a stain on both of them as far as their careers go, in my opinion, to exit just because you didn't win a championship in year one or even in year two for that matter. Now, with that being said, the West isn't going anywhere. Golden State's going to get stronger. Mm-hmm. We don't know if Golden State's going to make a run at a guy like a Giannis, and all of a sudden Denver's going to get better. Utah, are they going to be able to sign Donovan Mitchell long term? The Lakers, what are they looking for?
OKC and their
OKC, what's happening with Chris Paul? I'm about to call him Rich Paul. Chris Paul.
Right.
What's happening in Houston? Who's going to be the coach? So you got a lot of moving pieces over the next 12 to 24 months that's going to happen on the West Coast in terms of those teams. So you got to just let it play itself out. And if I'm Kawhi and I'm Paul George, I'm not even thinking about 2 years from now. I'm just concentrating on how do we get past the second damn round?
Yeah.
What is it? Who do we need to get to help us get past the second round so we could eventually beat the Lakers, something that we pushed all our chips to the middle of the deck for? This is what the Clippers did. They tried to counter what the Lakers did and Jeannie Buss did and Rob Pelinka did. They said, okay, we need to go get us one of those guys. We're going to get Kawhi. We're not going to say anything to anybody. We're going to keep it on the down low. We're going to be nice and quiet. They go and pull that move off. We're going to not say anything about Paul George. Nice and quiet. They pull that move off. They did everything. And so at the beginning of the year, the Vegas odds on the board kept saying Clippers, Lakers, Clippers, Lakers, Clippers. Then eventually it became Milwaukee. So the Clippers in Milwaukee was supposed to be the thorn in the sides of the Lakers. Well, neither one of those teams are in the bubble anymore. It's just the Lakers that are in the bubble. So they got to go back to the drawing board to figure it out.
It's a great call. I wish Jay Will was here. I know you're saying tongue-in-cheek. You wish you weren't here. But Jay Will did say the first day of our show, he gave a massive prediction, a bold prediction, and he said Clippers, Bucks, I don't think either one of them is going to be in the conference finals, and it was a great prediction on his part. One thing I wanted to mention, I think it was really instructive what you just said about everybody continually getting better. John Hollinger, our old colleague, used to work for us on ESPN.com. Then he went to the Memphis front office. He's now a website writer at The Athletic. He had a great line. He said when he was running Memphis, think about all the teams you just mentioned that are in pole position. And then you're like Memphis, Phoenix, San Antonio, Sacramento, Utah. And he essentially said, we said if we don't put the pedal to the metal, essentially what the Clippers did, we got to go now. The West is just getting tougher every single year. So if we're going to say we have a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan, it ain't going to work because in 2 or 3 years, the West is going to be tougher than it is right now. That's a huge conundrum for a lot of teams that are just fighting and scrapping.
Look, and it's I always say this about professional sports. You always look at the top, right? The ownership. And for so many years in LA, the ownership was dog you know what. And they got Steve Ballmer in, which is great ownership now. Mm-hmm. But this is just the beginning of his ownership duties. So the trend is changing for the Clippers. They shouldn't be embarrassed about the situation. Well, maybe.
When you consider their history, though.
Consider their history. I'm just messing with them. But
sure.
They shouldn't be embarrassed about it. The Lakers have been doing this forever. They're going to have a down year or 2 or 3. But then eventually they're going to figure out how to get back to where they're at now. The Boston Celtics, a down year 2 or 3. They're going to figure out how to get back. And it happens in professional sports, whether it's the Yankees here in New York or the Dodgers in L.A. They're eventually going to figure out how to win. I think the Clippers are pushing in that direction. They just got to figure out how to get out of the second round so they get that, whatever that monkey is, off their back. Mm-hmm. They're no longer going to be renting from the Lakers.
Own place.
They're going to have their own place. Just so happened to be in Big Brother's old backyard, which is Inglewood, California, where the farm, Great Western Farm, was at
Lakers'
for many years,
home.
the Lakers' old home. And so when you start to look at that, they're trying to get their own identity in L.A., and they certainly are starting off on the right foot. They just got to put it all together, and they wasn't able to do it this year.
Here's the best example that separates the Lakers and the Clippers, and Key has said it, and anybody that follows sports or loves the NBA knows that there's just a wide gulf between these two franchises. Just think about this for a second, and this is to tell you everything you need to know about the Lakers and the Clippers. The Clippers have never been to the Western Conference Finals in their history, 50-year history. The Lakers have made it back for the first time in 9 years.
Eight? Is it 8 or 9?
About 9, so 2010 to this start.
Just want to be right when you start talking about the Lakers, you know?
Let's call it a decade. Okay,
yes.
Let's call it a decade. 9 to 10 years. You're bridging 10 to 1920, right? So the Clippers haven't made the Western Conference Finals in their entire 50-year history. The Lakers' 9 to 10-year drought to get to the Western Conference Finals, longest in team history.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And so they've gone maybe 9 or 10 years without feeling this, and they feel like that's a drought.
We was suffocating. I mean, that's really how it was in L.A. It was, we were just happy to win a game, right? I mean, but again, organizations that are built a certain way, Pat Riley, Miami Heat, they figure out how to get it done. And I think the Clippers are putting themselves in that position. They just got to get over the hump, and they haven't been able to do it. I mean, 50 years. That's a long time. And this dates all the way back to San Diego, I'm sure.
Where they were before Los Angeles when they were the San Diego Clippers. Another thing to keep in mind that I think he brought up a great point. It's cross-pollination with sports, but it makes a lot of sense. There was a time where Alabama football really struggled. It always hasn't been like this. When they went to the Shula era, when they were in the Dubose era, if you follow college football, they struggled. Clemson wasn't like this. For a long time, LSU was an 8-win team. Your Trojans have struggled.
Hey, watch out.
I should have stopped at 3. Stopped at 3. But it just goes to show you in any sport, even when you look at the very, very, very top, there is some erosion, and you always have to give opportunity to get back. You said that the Clippers have to completely figure out what to do, go with the new plan, figure out what their identity is, and their sixth man, Lou Will, totally agrees with you.
Came up short. Just briefly, we had a conversation already amongst the guys that, we got a quick turnaround. We understand this is going to be quick off season, and let's get back to work and let's continue to build. We did have championship expectations. We had the talent to do it. I don't think we had the chemistry to do it in this show. We had lapses on defense and on offense where, I think guys that played in systems where they were expecting guys to be in certain spots offensively. A lot of different guys made adjustments, and so, it showed. But at the end of the day, we were up 3-1. We had 2 opportunities to win games. We were up 20 points. We should have closed this deal out, and we didn't. So you give credit to Denver for continuing to play. And like I said, we take our lumps and we keep moving.
I love those faces, though. I hate to gloat over that, but I love the faces when it looks like misery, especially for, with a team that is poised to make a run and put a dent into what your team is. And so when you're sitting here, you looking at Paul George, he's just sitting there like, it's